Well, you said there's 4 elements every family should focus on: guns, gold, land, and self-love.
Absolutely.
Now, the guns we've talked about before. Do you own a lot of gold?
Yeah, I do. I went through a company. So like, that's why I mentioned when you was talking about the stocks, playing the bank for yourself. So there's a company called Borrow, Borro. And they invest in high-end assets, art, gold, vehicles, things of that nature. So something I did early on, as I saw this storm brewing that a lot of us are dealing with right now, is I leveraged my gold. So at that time, I had between 22 and 24 kilos. And I remember one of my partners put me on to this place. I called them. These people actually let you borrow against your gold value. Now, do they give you...
Same thing that I was talking about with the stock portfolio.
Yeah, same thing, yep.
Really the exact same thing.
Yep. Now, do they give you top value of what your gold is worth? No, I'm not going to lie. They do like undercut you, not terribly, because I wouldn't have did the deal.
Right. Yeah. A kilo of gold right now is $106,000.
Right.
Yeah.
So yeah, I went through them, and that was one of the first things I did, because I actually got to a place in my my investing, where I was asset heavy, and then I really don't want to use the term too many assets, because I don't think you could ever really have too many, but I had got to a place where like I couldn't leverage none of them, so I reached out to this company. And then they basically let me start borrowing against the gold. But the difference between what you're doing, you do have to pay back. You got to pay those people every month on what you borrow. Otherwise, you'll lose it.
Yeah, I don't have to pay anything back.
Yeah.
So at one point, I had a certain amount of money from the money I used to buy my house, but I just stopped paying it back.
Right.
Nothing happens. It just accrues more interest.
Absolutely.
And it gets to the point until you have a certain threshold. So let's just say you have $1 million stock portfolio, you could borrow up to $500,000. Now, if you borrow $500,000 and you don't pay, and the interest increases, all they'll do is they'll start selling off pieces of your stock,
right? Okay.
To pay for the interest,
right?
But that's that's not that serious,
right?
It's not as serious as you have a loan and you don't pay it back, and suddenly you have massive interest payments, and they'll potentially take what it is that you own. And look, you can't, and sometimes you don't really know about assets. So for example, gold is at an all-time high right now.
Right.
But diamonds are at like a decade low.
Terrible.
Right now, because of synthetic diamonds are becoming more and more popular.
Yeah.
So you own diamonds as well?
Yeah. Not very little. I've always been big on gold. That was something I learned early on from Killer Mike and Nip. Just different having conversations
shout out to Mike.
with them.
I just spoke to him yesterday.
Yeah, having different conversations with them. I was like heavy with my gold, so I predominantly went gold. I bought very little diamonds, which I'm glad in retrospect I did buy very little.
Yeah, like for example, Robert Kiyosaki, Rich Dad Poor Dad. I did an interview with him, and he owns tons and tons of gold.
Right.
That's his thing. But the thing about investments that I want people to realize, because I think a lot of people are going to be watching us, figuring out what to do with their money.
Right.
Gold is cool for an asset, a place to park your money.
Yep.
But you can't compare gold to investing in a company like Amazon that is constantly making money every single day. Gold doesn't make any money.
Right.
When you buy some gold, you hope that when you sell it, there's someone willing to pay more for it than what you bought it for.
Yep.
But it doesn't actually generate anything. In fact, you even have to store it somewhere, and you have to pay for the storage and the security and everything else like that.
Yep.
I know like right now I'm going through some insurance stuff where I'm insuring some of my watches, and like I have to buy a safe, a TL15 or a TL30 safe, which means that for at least a safe like this, for at least 15 minutes, could withstand
the fire.
Not only a fire, but an attack by someone that knows how to break into safes.
Right.
These safes start at like $3,000 a piece and weigh like 700 pounds.
Yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about.
You see what I'm talking about?
Yeah.
So it's like you have, and listen, I have a watch collection. I have a Richard Mille. I got a bunch of Rolexes, platinum ones, and so forth. It's cool that I have them.
Right.
It's nice when I wear them. I like, I do interviews with them. People are like, ooh, like I get into interesting conversations with people, but they're not really investments.
Right.
They're just places to park my money because it's a little more fun to park your money in a watch than to put it into a bank account.
Agreed.
But it's not exactly the best investment.
Right.
Right.
And I end up learning that the hard way. That's why I say I end up having to go to that company, because I tried to leverage some of the gold at one point, and people trying to give me 30 grand for a 41 millimeter. I'm like, man, I spent 70,000. Like, this shit worth XYZ. And they're like, oh, well, we don't give a damn. We can't help you with that. So,
Right.
No, you're right. That's why I ended up going with that company, Boro, and they gave me a better deal.
Right. Well, you said the whole world is ran by around 13 families.
Yep.
Which families?
I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't even remember all of them by heart. I just know the one that I took the most liking into and I did the most research on was the Saudis. Their money is just like, yeah, they just fuck off Bugattis over there. They just live a different lifestyle. And I can't remember his name for nothing. I just know he's part of that family. But what really stood out to me is one dude, he got I think 39 kids. And I remember looking at him, I was like, oh, this the one I like. Yeah, he had a gang of children, but they were just talking about his billions. And I'm looking at their homes, but I vividly remember watching the documentaries on how J.P. Morgan got started and how these people was putting in work 200-300 years ago to make the Rothschilds, making sure their families the Waltons still control shit to this day. So I don't even remember the exact name of the documentary. I watched it on YouTube, but I direct people there all the time. Watch that documentary to really see who really running shit out here and how the money works.
No, look, once you're dealing with multi-generational wealth, where the family funds become the banks,
right?
And I think the Rockefellers were big on this, where whenever someone needs a loan, they don't go to the banks; they just go to the Rockefeller fund. Mm-hmm. They pull out the money and then they pay it back into the fund with a certain level of interest, and that in turn just builds the fund up year after year, as opposed to giving money to the bank and they're just fleecing you for interest.
Exactly.
When I bought a house, I did something called a shareholder loan, which allowed my company to lend money to me as the shareholder at an interest rate that was the lowest possible interest rate you could possibly get at the time.
I learned something new today. I didn't know that either.
Yeah, and the payoff is whenever I really feel like it.
Okay.
You see what I'm saying? So it's once you actually have cash, once you have stocks, once you have land, once you have gold and other assets, you no longer need the banks to actually make, because there's going to be a point in your life where you're going to need money. Right. At some point, you're going to go to war. Mm-hmm. Right. Whatever that means.
Agreed.
And you're going to need a war chest.
Look, I was just watching you and TK the other day agree, shaking my head all the time. Yep. Like, I agree 1,000%.
You have to go to war at some point. It'll be unexpected.
Yeah.
And if you can't outspend your enemy, you're going to have a world of problems.
I agree.
Yeah.
And that's what I ran into in 2024. I'm broke on paper, but I'm rich in assets. And then I ran into that where okay, we got millions of dollars in this, but we don't have the millions of dollars physically. And I learned that lesson in 2024. Next go round, when I get more lump sums and I'm able to spend $1 million again in a day, I'm not going to just tie it up. Like you said, parking it in gold. That investment is cool, and I enjoyed it because I'm actually able to wear that investment at times when I feel like it. So it did serve a dual purpose. It was cool, but moving forward, I agree with you 100% on putting in things that's going to actually generate some more bread and not just level it out or keep it stagnant.
Yeah, I mean, look, I came up middle class. My parents were lower middle class. I'm a first generation immigrant. I understand that at a certain financial level, you're being told a lot of things and you tend to believe them. Yeah. And your parents did it a certain type of way and they did okay. So you're taught to kind of follow in your parents' footsteps. But my parents were not millionaires. They were not multimillionaires. They did okay. I never had to support them. My dad passed away. My mom is fine. She owns her own house. But they are nowhere near my wealth level. Right. So what I do, I can't look at them and say how they did it. Right. Because it's a totally different thing. Handling $10,000 and handling $1 million is not the same skill set.
Agreed.
And if you approach it in the same way, you're going to end up losing $1 million.
Right.
Losing 10,000 is a loss that most people could take. Losing $1 million is very painful.
Absolutely.
Especially if it's the only million that you have.
Right.
And what I find is that most people, and I'm not just talking about regular working people, I've had talks with celebrities that I've interviewed that are multimillionaires off camera, and it's I made $3 million this year, but then last year I was broke, and I just got to get this bag again, and I got to flip it real quick, and it's you've been in the music business for like 20 years. You should not be broke for a year and trying to flip money. Like it's kind of crazy hearing this, but a lot of people, they want to do the quick flip.
Mm-hmm.
They want it, and this is why, look, shout out to everyone. My man Willie D, great friend of mine. He's done really well with crypto. But I know a lot of people that lost their shirt.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? And for me, people have always asked me, well, how come we don't invest in crypto? And this simply, I don't know it well enough to invest.
Same here.
Right?
Yeah.
I don't want to get into a FOMO kind of situation where like everyone else is making money, so I got to make money.
Right.
And the thing with crypto also is that I think, what's his name? The founder of Twitter, Jack
Dorsey.
Jack Dorsey. He said something interesting. He said that the way, for example, Bitcoin will ultimately fail if all it is a place to store money.
Mm-hmm.
Until you have a real application for crypto that makes more sense than using dollars, it's still going to be speculative.
Absolutely.
Now, I understand that now it's like the fourth biggest or fifth biggest asset in the world, because a lot of people, I think they feel like, well, it's going to be worth so much more in the future, so let me get on now before it's too late. But what exactly does it do that fixes a problem that regular money can't fix?
Agreed. I agree.
And I'm not quite sure yet, which is why I've kept my money out of crypto.
Right, I have too. I had a lot of people tell me, not knocking it either, shout out, because I do know some people who won with it. So not, not taking nothing away from their story, but I have a gang of people that attempted to explain it, but I don't know what it is. If I'm having a slow moment to this day, I just still cannot wrap my mind around crypto and how it is just absolutely going to be the best thing ever in the next 10 years and change humanity.
I mean, there are some advantages, like the stock market is only open during certain days, certain hours. Crypto could be exchanged at any point. I think like XRP fixed a problem where a lot of people would send money to their relatives overseas using Western Union.
Yep.
And that required a whole bunch of fees, and you got to fill out paperwork, and it's really cumbersome, and stuff gets messed up. You got to go to a location, and you could transfer XRP really quickly.
Gotcha.
But like these countries, like I forgot, was it Colombia that made Bitcoin their national currency, is a bit insane.
Oh, yes, a couple of them that did that. I saw that.
It's a bit crazy because the fluctuation. Right. I mean, imagine if the dollar was worth 50% less one day. Right. Like, imagine the chaos that would occur. Absolutely. Not only in America, but all over the world if the dollar suddenly fluctuated like Bitcoin. Not even 50%. Imagine a 5%, 10% loss a big deal. In the dollar.
Yeah. That changes life for a lot of people, everything. For sure. Yeah.